Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Hi, this is Bruce Hutchin, host of Whitetail Rendezvous. And yes, I'm still at ATA 2019, and I'm at Pro Tracker with Gary Christensen. Gary, welcome to the show, and tell me, what's so special about Pro Tracker?
Well, thank you anyway. I appreciate you stopping by. Well, Pro Tracker is actually a system to help you find and recover any animal you shot with an arrow. We've seen a need in the industry is that the wound loss, animals being lost, that was a trophy to them, or even a big trophy, maybe a record. But we found that trying to find that animal sometimes is very difficult. 9 years ago, we decided we wanted to come out on the market and bring a product that would help you do that. That is the Pro Tracker system. What the Pro Tracker is a transmitter is carried with your arrow to the animal. Upon impact, the transmitter will actually come out, lets the arrow continue through, and then the transmitter, as it's buried on the outside of the animal, will send a signal to the receiver. The receiver will pick that up and say, okay, this transmitter is live and active, which direction to go to find and recover that animal.
So it's kind of like a GPS homing beacon?
It actually is radio frequency, so it's anywhere in the world it can be used. You could be in a deep canyon, you could have water on it, you could be submerged in a stream, and still get a signal.
So line of sight?
It is a line of sight, so it's got a 2-mile maximum range, but generally, if you've got heavy dense cover, and maybe a mile and a quarter, just depending on how dense.
How about canyon country?
Which kind?
Canyon country. I'm sheep hunting. I'm sheep hunting, and I shot a mountain goat. He went the wrong way.
Okay, good question. Good question. I live in Utah, and we hunt down into the red canyons in southern Utah. We get into those deep old canyons. So as the animal's running away from you, and all of a sudden he goes off into one of those canyons. So now all of a sudden the signal stops. All you do is go in the direction that you last saw that animal run, get a little bit of elevation. Think of a pebble in a pond. You throw that pebble out, it just ripples effect. That's how the signal works. So once you get to the point where that ripple is going around, your transmitter will be sending the signal, the receiver will pick it up, and now you know where he's gone.
And so that takes me right to him?
It will. It will. As you get closer, the number increases. So is it accurate? Absolutely. We've actually lost animals, had them submerged in ponds, and actually found them because it's not for real deep water, but it was under about 18 inches. The signal was there. I went and found where that animal's laid.
So I'm in Alaska. I'm hunting muskox, Arctic Circle. Just bad weather. You can't see. Absolutely. And he slips into one of those pressure ridges. How do I find him?
Okay. When you first shoot that animal with your arrow, you know he's gone either north, south, east, or west.
He's gone somewhere.
He does. When you know that he's gone that way, just point the receiver in that direction. Now you'll get a reading. So now you've locked onto that beacon. Let's call it a beacon. So you pick that up. As he's going away, it's going to go down in signal strength. And the closer you get, the signal strength comes up. So all of a sudden a snowstorm comes through, and it's a whiteout. But you know that he went in north, south, east, west, because everybody's got a compass. If you're up there in the Arctic like that, you're going to know directions. As you work your way in that direction and you last pick that signal up, eventually you will pick it up. It'll go beep. Now it's on. So can you find it? Yes. Is it a learning experience? Absolutely. It's like anything. We like to go out and have our grandkids play hide and seek. Take the transmitters, go out and hide. One of them takes a receiver, and you have to go find it.
Good idea. That would be a good training thing.
And it's fun. It keeps them occupied on a Sunday afternoon.
How long are the batteries good for?
Once it comes out, you have 12 to 15 hours of life of your battery, but no power is being used until after you shoot the animal.
Okay, so once it made impact, I've got to recover them within 12 hours. Now, if I shoot them at 6 o'clock-ish at night, the weather goes to crap. It's 6 a.m. the next morning, 12 hours is gone.
It is, but we actually have some that will run 18 to 24 hours. They're just different levels of a transmitters you want to buy. They cost a little bit more money.
Okay, so
but the average one is 12 to 15 hours.
Okay, for whitetail hunting, for elk hunting, maybe moose, sheep, goats.
Absolutely. We've shot whitetail, mule deer, elk, antelope. We've had people shoot alligators. Because
that'd be interesting.
They go down under the water, and eventually they got to come up. And now they're up, and they're over here.
Interesting. How'd you come up with this?
You know, my partner, that I'm in business with, has an elk ranch, and he saw a need that we have to have this product out there because people were losing animals. And so we pulled our resources together, come up with some ideas, and some engineers work on it. You know, it's trial and error. We got it to the product to the point where we could bring it out on the market, and now we're out now. This is our third production run. So what we've done is our carriers now, which carries the transmitter to the animal, is made out of 70-75. It's aircraft aluminum. It's the strongest aluminum made. Light and strong. We got a new antenna, which is almost micro in diameter and smallness. We got a different hooking system. You end up having to actually cut it out of the animal. You can't pull it out. Then we actually have a neon bright green. You would think that red or a fluorescent orange would be great on the floor of the forest, but you've got the red leaves. You can't find red, but bright green you can. We've improved our antenna a little bit on our receiver, but most of it is we've made sure that we build a product that we would like, we're proud of, and we stand behind it 100%.
Who makes your arrows for you?
You can use any arrow of your choice.
Okay, it's an insert though.
It is. All you do is screw it on your favorite arrow, and you put your favorite broadhead, either mechanical or fixed. It doesn't matter.
How much weight forward change does that give you?
We're adding about 230 grains. But if you notice, the industry is going to weight forward now.
Right.
Or weight for deeper penetration. How you modify your arrow is, say you shoot a 29-inch arrow, cut 3 inches off, put another insert on, screw this on the end. So now when you pull back upon the rest, what you'll do is it'll actually elevate it. Now when it elevates it, it raises it up enough that you've sighted your bow in with your regular arrow, put the protractor on, at 20, 30, 40, and 50 yards, this will shoot side by side with your regular arrow, even though we've added 230 grains.
Amazing.
We've done our research, we've tested it. We've tested it on elk, mule deer. We've shot lots of targets. We've got many hours. We know how it works.
Well, Gary, this is a pleasure. How do people get in touch with you on social media?
We are on Instagram. It's called Protractor Archery. But we also have a website. If you want to just Google protractor.com or Protractor Archery, it'll bring us right up.
Thank you so much for your time. One last thing, if somebody buys that brand new, what's the first thing they should do?
Give me a call, because that's one thing we've advocated is customer service. We want to make sure that you use it right. Most guys, not gals, but guys, whenever we build something or put something together out of a box, we never read the instructions.
That's for sure.
Fun and it's easy.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Appreciate you stopping by. Thank you.
Hey folks, Bruce Hutchin. Yes, I am still at ATA 2019, and Jared Hess is with me. Jared, who you got with us?
This is Brian Hallbly. He's the co-host on the Habitat podcast, which is our podcast that we started. Good to see you again, Bruce. It's been a while.
Yeah, this is so much fun. And folks, this is about collaboration. And Jared and I are doing this little podcast thing to kind of reiterate with people, you know, help your buddy out. Help the guy out that's doing the same thing you are. Yeah, I got my daughter's been a while longer than Jared, but he reached out to me and said, hey, I want some help. I want to figure this out. And us with over 340,000 downloads and 560 plus episodes and 40,000 people on social media, I guess they know a little bit of something about podcasting.
You're the guy to talk to. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But I'm saying that, but Jared, the key thing with Jared and why I like him and respect him is he asks for help, and he's a humble guy, and he wants to do something with his podcast about the habitat. So, Jared, share with the folks what the podcast's all about.
Sure. So it's Habitat Podcast is the name of the podcast, habitatpodcast.com. And what we do is we help people learn how to better their habitat for wildlife management. Food plots, timber stand improvement, water holes, pheasant grasses, CRP, whatever you want to do to better your land or even your friend's land or whomever for better hunting, better wildlife, you know, make the animals feel more at home. What your experience? Do a lot of invasive species removal. All we talk about is just habitat. So,
what's your role?
I'm just the co-host. Jared does all the heavy lifting. He's really put together something special. So, happy to be a part of it. We've got some great guests. It's just a pleasure talking to them and helping our listeners out. That's what we're all here to do, is learn, become better habitat managers.
Yep. So if somebody want to reach out to you and find you on social media, how do they do that?
Yep, just look up Habitat Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, our habitatpodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere you can get a podcast, so we're on there. Like Brian said, our slogan is just to become better habitat managers. So I want to help everybody learn.
Yeah, what's your relationship with QDMA?
We've had them on. Lindsey Thomas Jr., he's the editor of the Quality Whitetails magazine, great publication. We've had him on. We're friends, we're supporters, we're members, we're longtime members, Brian and I, and we urge everybody else to be as well.
One thing, folks, if you're not a member of QDMA, then you're not serious about whitetail hunting. Yes, I just said that. If you want me to say it again, I will. If you're not serious about QDMA, then get serious about it, because QDMA has the best resources for research, scientific-based research, factual information, not barroom information, but factual information. Go to QDMA. Doesn't cost much, and I'm coming out with a program that it's even going to be more economical, or you're going to have an opportunity to join QDMA. You heard it first at 2019 ATA, but that's coming out probably in March. But anyway, I'm working with QDMA. We're close to signing everything off. It's not a done deal, but it looks like we're going to be able to offer something special, because I believe every single whitetail hunter out there should be a member of QDMA.
For sure.
Any last words?
Join QDMA and make sure to follow Bruce at the Whitetail Rendezvous. And we're here at the Habitat Podcast if you ever want to look us up. So thanks, Bruce.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
An experienced partner, a credible partner, to kind of bring this arena together so we can talk for the next hour about CWD. When we first started talking about this and they approached us about partnering with them, we said absolutely. Because we felt this was going to be a great opportunity to get the media, some celebrities, and some other folks in a room and give you all a chance to kind of learn about some of the perspectives about CWD, hopefully give you some information and some guidance. Because this disease continues to spread, it is a significant concern to deer hunters, and it should be to all deer hunters and the industry. Obviously, ATA is interested because deer hunters drive archery industry, bow hunting in a big way. And so we're all about resource protection, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we hope that in the next hour, through a combination of a couple of presentations we got, followed by hopefully about 40 minutes or so of question and answers, that we can answer a lot of the questions that you have, give you some great information, and leave you with some contact information, hopefully that will help you, because you are in this room mostly the ground troops that are communicating with a lot of folks on a daily basis, and we want to help you inform your audiences in the best possible way. So I'm going to give a brief introduction of the panelists that we have, followed by that introduction. Then we're going to jump right into just a couple of minutes each of a presentation from these. Starting today is going to be Dr. Grant Woods. Grant is educated at Missouri State and the University of Georgia, and ultimately finished with his PhD at Clemson University. And he has been the head of the consulting firm Woods & Associates since 1990. And as most of you know, Grant has done a lot of consulting, not only across the whitetails range, and has been very active in communications with TV shows and the like, and is a great, passionate deer hunter, and is going to be great for this panel. To his left, we've got Kip Adams, and Kip also is a certified wildlife biologist. He works with the Quality Deer Management Association. He is actually the director of conservation for that organization. He received his BS from Pennsylvania State University, MS in Wildlife Management from New Hampshire. And Kip has spent a lot of his time on the stump. He's given over 500 presentations on deer hunting and habitat management. He's co-authored parts of 5 books, and he is a voice for wildlife management in many respects for the Quality Deer Management Association. So next to his left is Brian Murphy, and Brian is the president and CEO of Quality Deer Management Association. Brian, like myself, received his master's degree from the University of Georgia studying deer. Brian decided to leave the United States and go to Australia for a number of years when he finished up and worked as a deer biologist over there. He received lots of accolades for that. Since then, he came and he is heading the Quality Deer Management Association, where he's been there for since 1977. I mean, 1997. And he too is an acclaimed author, has written a lot of books and has given lots of talk, and is a very well-respected deer biologist, and he runs a great organization. And then to his left, we've got Nick Pinizzotto. Nick is not a biologist by training, a little bit different in that he received his master's degree in psychology, and he has a bachelor's degree in environmental geography. He currently is a CEO and the president of the National Deer Alliance, which was formed to be an advocacy group for deer. They have focused on CWD, and Nick is currently working on a coordinated CWD national plan on the issue. So all these gentlemen, I think, are hunters, they're bow hunters, got perspectives. They're not CWD prime researchers, but they bring a lot of credibility, a lot of passion, a lot of interest, and I think they share the same goal we do, and that is protecting the resource and informing our constituency so we can hopefully manage this disease better into the future. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a couple presentations, and Grant is going to speak first, and his topic is really what is CWD, how does it spread, main factors. Dan is going to talk about what impact does CWD have on hunters and agencies. And Brian's going to follow that and say what can hunters do to prevent introduction and reduce the spread, followed by Nick, who's going to give some comments regarding federal level concerns, issues, initiatives, and actions in play or in work to help with the CWD issue in terms of funding and management as well. So with that, Grant, I'm going to pass that over to you. Following all of their comments, so if you get a comment from Grant right out of the box, write it down and we'll get to you later. Once these gentlemen get through, then we hope to have a pretty robust conversation with you all. So write the comments down and look forward to the dialogue. Go ahead, Grant.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So I'll go quickly. CWD, chronic wasting disease, is a disease that impacts a prion, which is a bent protein. All mammals have prions. This one, however, is irregular shaped and has the ability to make other prions become irregular shaped. And it's a nasty thing that if you put it in chlorox or something like that, or cook it at about 1500 degrees, it's still infected. So it's not something easy to take care of. It's not a virus. It should not be confused with EHD. It started about here, and I won't go through the whole chronology, but over time has spread a lot. Tennessee could be added to this map. I'm not aware of anywhere else, but it is spreading. It's not just one place. So, as I mentioned, it belongs to a fatal. It is, as far as we know, 100% fatal. Big old name, transmissible, spongiform encephalopathies. In the same family as mad cow disease, but not the same. It's never been shown that CWD or something to do with deer on that MCWD goes to cattle, which is a real blessing. It's never been shown to go to a human in the field, and certainly thousands or possibly millions of deer have been consumed, especially early on in northern Colorado places before we even had a name for what was going on. Again, related, I'm getting hit myself, and one that's really old that really intrigues me is scraping in sheep. So we've known about it for a long time, and it didn't cross the barrier from sheep to other animals. So that should be somewhat comforting to us. It's in the same family of diseases. The really bad thing about this disease, it can be in the critter for 16 months or longer and not show any outward signs or lesions. And I think that lag time is one of the things about this disease that makes it very difficult to communicate. Well, deer look fine on my land. I'm not finding them dead by water like I do HD. Those are all problems in the communication and how serious this disease is. These diseases are not broken down easily, but they communicate easily to other animals. Mouth to mouth, critter to critter, critter to a deposit on the ground, maybe through urination, defecation, salivation for sure. So you can see where that leads to getting deer close together and allowing this disease to spread quicker. All the deer family can be impacted, and in fact have been impacted at different levels at different critters. It's not just whitetails or muleys, all the deer, including caribou in the deer family. Movement of deer and deer parts, many of us believe, I believe, is the way that map got spread really. You look at me like I did somewhere. No, it's good. I believe it went, jumped to Tennessee or Pennsylvania places really quickly. It didn't just make one dot on the map and spread out in all directions simultaneously. So moving of deer, when we say deer parts, let's say maybe you're lucky and you tagged a very mature muley or elk in Colorado years ago before knowing any better. You brought the whole critter home except for eviscerating it and took the meat off, took the skull off, whatever, and then put the spine and spinal cord and brains on the back 40, which had a lot of prions in there. That could have been a source of infection. That could be one mode of transmission of how it leapfrogged to many areas over time. Contact with the effects, again, the remains. Consumption, there's some scientists that certainly believe that when these are deposited through urination or defecation, it gets in soil, a plant takes the prion up, again it's not degraded, and then a deer could eat that plant. Gosh, that is super scary, isn't it? Think about this, a crow or a scavenger pecks on a deer that died from CWD. Let's say it's a crow, flies 100 miles away, which is common for crows, lights there, defecates, some dies, does whatever, and deposits CWD somewhere else. This is a real map from Pennsylvania of legally transported deer. I think that is extremely scary. Again, the map, this looks ugly. Let me tell you how ugly it is. I live right there. I'm right in it. This year there was a posse found less than a mile on this side of my farm, less than a mile on this side of the farm. I'm bullseye. I preach this. I would be a hypocrite if I didn't. Our deer season goes to January 15th, our archery season. About January 20th, we will start taking deer down with rifles under permit. I make a living of deer, folks. I'm living it. There's no known vaccine, no cure, no practical live test. Please understand this. We can't move deer because we can't test it and say, oh, that deer doesn't have CWD. We can say it has it or we don't know. And we say it has it after the deer is dead. There is no practical, feasible live test. Therefore, we cannot move deer without knowing if we're potentially spreading CWD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. We'll transition now into some of the impacts that we know that this has on hunters in these areas, as well as the state wildlife agencies. And as hunters, we often think of just how does it impact me. And we also need to take a look at this and step back because we're all in this together. And it doesn't do us any good to hate our agencies. It doesn't do our agencies any good to hate us because we can't solve it without both of us working together. So the next few minutes here, my part of this is just say, let's look at some actionable things that are happening on the ground right now. CWD is now in 26 states. It's in over half the states in the country. And we have the privilege to work in all of those different states with hunters and agencies and landowners. So we're going to show you things that are actually happening across the whitetails range on a daily basis that impact both hunters and agencies. And then Brian will take off after that and talk about some of the opportunities we have as hunters to help us. One of the things that we see almost all the time is you take this, we know we're going to have a population reduction, we start this, CWD, next thing we know there's a regulation, let's take that and go to that. And we're not only balancing deer herds with habitat, in many cases we're asking to reduce those deer herds below what the habitat can support. And how many of you as hunters want to see less deer tomorrow than you do today? How many of you just lied to me and didn't raise your hand? We don't want to see less deer tomorrow, and we never want to see less deer around. But this is often the reality of what happens. We can debate forever whether this is helping or not, but the reality is this is what is happening, this is what is being asked. So as hunters, we don't like it. But I'll tell you this, for the agency, and they don't like it either, because they know it infuriates hunters,
And even with that, they know how difficult it is to accomplish this, even if hunters are helping. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal that happens right off the bat. One of the things as hunters that we like is we like things to be traditional. You know, we are extremely traditional from a hunting end. We like the hunting season to start the same day every year. We like the same folks to be at hunting camp this year as it was last year. We have the same meal every Friday night or every Sunday night before opening day. So anything that impacts that traditional culture of what we have, we buck as hunters. And I get it, I'm the same way as well. I grew up in a very traditional deer hunting camp in northern Pennsylvania. And I like things to be the same too. And as soon as CWD hits, that all goes out the window. We now have CWD check stations that you got to take your deer to. We have movement regulations. We have longer hunting seasons. We have additional hunting seasons. We have sharpshooting. All of these things go against what we want to keep things the same. Are they necessary or not? We can debate that again, and in many cases they are. They are absolutely necessary. But as hunters, we don't like them. And I can assure you from agencies, and they wish that they didn't have to do these either. There ends up being a loss of privileges, no more feeding, no more baiting, no more minerals, no more urine attractants, and often the big one, in many cases now mature bucks are no longer encouraged. You think, geez, I've been spending the last 20 years practicing QDMA and protecting things so that I have an opportunity to photograph bigger deer, an opportunity to hunt bigger deer. And now here's where the real kicker comes in. Some agencies have said, you know what, we are keeping our buck harvest regulations exactly like we have now. Pennsylvania is a perfect example because hunters are engaged, they like it, and we want to maintain that support to help the rest of our program. Hunters in Pennsylvania are extremely happy. You have other states saying, you know what? The science says that older bucks have this a higher prevalence rate, so we're removing animal restrictions, we're removing any type of protection or encouragement to protect yearling bucks. We want to kill all these bucks. So you have hunters in these other states looking, well, why are the folks in Pennsylvania doing something entirely different? So there's a lot of miscommunication out there, and a lot of agencies doing the exactly opposite thing, which contributes to the problem. We end up with license money diverted from herd and habitat management programs for things like CWD sampling, CWD monitoring, CWD surveillance. These are all very necessary things. These have to happen. But certainly we don't want to have to spend the money on it. And actually since 2002, when they've confirmed CWD in Wisconsin, the DNR there now has spent over $49 million on this. Think about this, if they didn't have the disease, they could have taken that money instead and spent it on things like hunter access, land purchase, habitat management, etc. From as a hunting end, man, we would have loved that. I can assure you, for the DNR, they would like that too. So this is a very big deal from a dollar standpoint, the reality of it. We know the hunting participation rates decline. This takes a look at several years in Wisconsin. 2001 is the year that they actually killed the first deer that tested positive. They confirmed it in spring or winter of 02 after the new year. So this is what happened. In 2002, look at that big drop in hunting license sales. It recovered a little bit in 03, but it never recovered after that. And what happens when we have fewer hunting license sales and fewer hunters? Well, fewer hunters leads to less money for wildlife management. And fewer hunters leads to less advocates for hunting. We don't want anybody to hunt right beside us. We'd like a little more room, but at the end of the day, we all need to have more hunters out there to continue to have deer in the future, the opportunity to hunt this animal. And lastly, is CWD positive medicine safe to eat? Well, both the World Health Organization and Centers for Disease Control says absolutely do not eat. There's never been a case where it's crossed the species barrier to humans, and we hope to God there never is. But we're suggested not to eat it. And this is a real issue today for folks and families thinking about this. And even if you choose to think, you know what, I don't care, I'm going to eat it. You're going to feed it to your little boy, or your little girl, or the neighbor down the street that you've always donated deer to. You know, you have to make this decision yourself, but this is a real decision that's being made throughout the whitetails range today. And I'll say this, I have a wonderful wife. I way outkick the coverage when it comes to finding somebody to spend the rest of my life. And I'll be the first one to say that I don't wash my hands enough or I leave meat out of the refrigerator too long. She is very good at letting me do what I want to do from hunting net. But when I travel to hunt, one of the first things that she asked me now was not, where are you going or how long are you going to be gone? My wife asked, is CWD been found there? You know, it's a reality that we have to deal with throughout the whitetails range. And it's obviously a reality that all of you deal with today, but we're going to have to deal with in the future. So the idea is let's figure out how we can best fight this, best maintain the spread until the science catches up with us, and we can find a cure for this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian and let him talk about what we can all do as hunters to help us.
And I want to start with a thank you for all of you for taking time out of your schedule. This show is very hectic and busy for all of you. I know it is for us as well, and to have a full crowd here is much appreciated, so thank you. As the previous seminar upstairs, Dr. Henderson pointed out and Grant Woods confirmed, there's a lot we don't know about CWD. It's been around a long time. One thing I can say, we know fairly concretely is that if you spend 10 years or more working with it, like we have, it affects hair loss quite significantly. We all share that commonality. And I want to start with some perspective here because, this is a very dark subject. It's hard to be optimistic, and I'm a natural optimist. But, you hear 26 states now have CWD. It's a factual statement. But let's give it some perspective. Currently, only 6% of counties in the deer's range in North America are CWD positive counties. So 94% of hunters still hunt in CWD-free areas. So that's an important take-home message that we don't have to assume that CWD is naturally going to spread in every nook and cranny. In fact, some of the best CWD prion biologists and researchers that I speak with don't agree that it has to necessarily spread everywhere. And we should, therefore, take some very concrete actions as hunters and as media to share those messages so we can slow that spread and hopefully prevent many areas from becoming CWD positive. And something that we ran across as an organization over the last year is some human dimensions research in epidemiology, looking at messaging. And it showed very clearly that if the message is negative, but without solutions, the reader often goes to false messages. In other words, alternative facts, alternative explanations. However, if a credible source not only points out the problems, but provides concrete action steps, they're more likely to take positive actions. So I think that from a media standpoint, that's an important message. These are some messages that we believe that hunters, or actions hunters should take, or messages you should communicate as the outdoor media to hunters. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there. First thing is become informed. There's a whole lot of hunters out there, most hunters, unless it's in your backyard, don't know much, if anything, about CWD. And if they do, they often get it confused with EHD. Very different diseases, very different strategies to impact that disease. Determine if CWD even exists where you hunt, or in areas that you have to drive through in terms of regulations. Easiest way to get that done right now is go to, if you go on X Maps, they have a CWD map there we keep updated regularly, go on the map. Learn what those carcass regulations are in the area you hunt and or states you drive through. A number of states now have requirements that regardless of whether that animal is harvested in a CWD area or not, it still has to be deboned. So you may not have that regulation in the home state where you harvested the animal, but traveling to another state, you may be breaking that state's laws. So know what they are. North Carolina Resources Division has a very good website for that. That's a good source of information. Become engaged. Get off your backside and become engaged. Share what you learn with your friends, your family, your hunting buddies. You're not an island unto yourself. You have circles of influence. And if you're an avid hunter, you probably have a large circle of influence. Use that influence. Make sure they take similar actions as you. Follow your state's regulations. If they do change these things that we cherish, whether it be baiting, feeding, minerals, deer urine, if that's the law, folks. Let's stick with it. Set a good example. Again, follow your state's guidelines for testing and disposal of carcasses as well. Understand what they are, what to do if you do in fact have to get that carcass disposed. Follow those processing and transport guidelines as well. Again, encourage others to do the same. Next is become vigilant. And it's not vigilante necessarily, but become vigilant. All right? Check your sources, question your sources. There's a lot of misinformation going out in today's media about chronic wasting disease. If you look closely at possible motives or biases behind that information, you can see a pretty clear reason why some of those messages are coming from the people they are. So don't trust at face value. Get good information. Report hunters are not adhering to these transport and or testing and disposal guidelines. At the very least, scruff them by the neck if they're a buddy. You may not have to turn them into the law enforcement folks, but do the right thing and encourage them to do the right thing as well. This is a big one. If you know anybody planning to transport live animals without proper regulations and permits, whether they're captive deer, individual people doing it on their own, as Grant pointed out, the two greatest risk sources, bar none, are movement of live deer, movement of infected deer parts. Those are the two holy grail of this whole battle. We can play with urine and all these other things all day long. The things that are going to matter are live deer and infected deer parts. Those are the big ones. So let's focus on those. All right, that's for all hunters. I'm going to speak specifically now to those hunters that are in known CWD areas. There's a few extra steps that they should be taking. Learn what those testing requirements are. If you are in an area that requires testing or even allows testing, my recommendation is get that animal tested. Go ahead and process that venison. If you have to wait 2 or 3 weeks, label those packages. If the test results come back positive, you at least know what packages of venison to dispose of. And again, follow the disposal regulations. Yeah, get the deer tested, get the results back. Our recommendation would be not to consume that animal, but that's a personal decision. That's not a professional decision. If it does test positive, dispose of that venison at an improved site. Some states will have drop sites Others will just say use a landfill or whatever technique that they recommend. Do not just go down and dump it in your pasture. You know, that's not an approved method of disposal. And support your agency's antlerless harvest goals to help minimize CWD. That doesn't mean kill every deer out there. Unfortunately, we've often adopted the same approach every time. That is reduce deer density, take away a lot of practices hunters like. Unfortunately, that strategy has not proven successful today. That is still the best known approach that we're aware of at this point. All right, a couple of last things. This is a very, very hotly contested one. Most purists on the disease front will say shoot every male deer you possibly can. Have the youngest buck age structure you possibly can. Okay? Because older bucks are 2 to 4 times more likely to be CWD positive than young bucks. But old does are also more likely to be CWD positive than young does. So we have to work on both ends, folks. And our recommendation as an organization is it's better to have a few of those middle-aged bucks out there if that keeps hunters engaged and working with their agency, getting does harvested, and getting animals tested, than it is to just completely lose the support of their hunter base. Get incredible people in your community to come speak, whether it's an agency person, a university person, QDMA, anybody with reasonable credentials without a real deep bias. Come, let them share information like this at gatherings of hunters. Get hunters engaged and get involved. So it really is a 3-pronged message: staying informed, engaged, and vigilant. Thank you.
Now I get to talk about the exciting stuff, politics. And I'm also leading the way in hair loss in this group. So. And the youngest as well, for what it's worth. All right, so let's talk about politics, the fun stuff. Here we go. All right, so federal legislation. We're talking about all the different things that we can do as hunters, and that's great. And I think at the end of the day, it will be hunters that save the day on this issue, like we have so many other issues in the deer world over the years. But these are some things going on right now. So we've got a couple of bills in federal legislation that's out there, a House bill and a Senate bill, which are really designed to provide support to the states, because for every dollar a state is spending on CWD, they're not spending a dollar on something else, and they're often not able to get additional dollars to work on this issue. So we need some federal help, and also one that is focused entirely on research, which we'll talk about here in a second. So a little more detail on these bills. This is the House bill. And the high points are $20 million would go to states, 5 to the tribes, $10 million for rapid response. So Tennessee, for example, just found out they have the disease, special money for that, but $10 million for research. Federal bill, very similar, $25 million for research. And this bill that we call the Abraham bill, by the way, those first 2 bills that I showed you, they've kind of been languishing out there. They were introduced last year, and they haven't gotten a ton of support. But that's not totally a negative, because we've got people on Capitol Hill talking about chronic wasting disease, which is a step in the right direction. This bill here, this is the, Ralph Abraham introduced this from Louisiana, who incidentally is a veterinarian, so he's keyed into this issue. And this would specifically study the pathways and mechanisms for transmission of this disease, because as many of the panelists have already talked about, there's a lot about this disease that we don't know, and that's a very dangerous position to be in, because then we're going out and making management recommendations based on what we think we might know. And that's not good for a lot of things, including what we're all doing here at the show, here, industry, and so on. So we'll get into that more in a second. This one has a little more steam behind it, and I think has a real good opportunity. We'll continue to work on it. So some things going on Capitol Hill, positive things. In the Farm Bill, we actually, this year, were able to get past, part of that would be to prioritize CWD grants in the Farm Bill. That's something that's never happened before, so that's unprecedented. That's a step in the right direction. More people know about it. Working specifically with the Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, these agencies that have authority over this disease. Emergency appropriation we tried to get at the end of the lame duck session, so we weren't all that far from getting $50 million, if you can imagine that amount of money to go to this disease. And that sounds like a huge number, but it's still only a scratch the surface number, which is a little bit scary. And also, don't underestimate the importance of your influence as a constituent. Brian, one of the things, he talked about a lot of practical things you can do. One of the other things is get involved in this issue. So it doesn't do any good to hate on your wildlife agency, but what it might do some good. And I'm also not saying, by the way, that you shouldn't question them, because you absolutely should. You should ask questions. We should all ask questions, but there's an appropriate way to do that, and there are ways to be more effective than some of the things we've seen. We did a legislative briefing last year to get a lot of legislators aware of this issue, which was a good thing. This is another factor that we work on, and Grant touched on this in his presentation, and this is working with USDA and their program and how they regulate the captive servant industry or the deer farm industry. The program itself is a good idea, but how it's run is not necessarily as effective as it could be. That's not to say that it's terribly bad. The point here is we need to work together. We need to make sure the conservation interest and wild deer interests are represented in these initiatives, and not just, again, USDA, Department of Agriculture, they're focused on the agricultural end. But what about our wild deer that are worth so much to everybody? I think it was Dan mentioned the National CWD plan in the introductions. This is something that the National Deer Alliance is specifically working on. I would say, you know, it's funny, when we started the Deer Alliance about 3-4 years ago, we sat down and listed out all these great priorities of things we were going to work on, and then lo and behold, CWD just kept kind of climbing to the point where now it's probably 75 to 80% of what I do with the Deer Alliance. So, but we can't do it alone, and all of these organizations that are listed here, and there's some that aren't, the point here is to say, as conservation organizations, we all have different resources that we can bring to the table. We're good at some things, and other things we're maybe not so strong at. So the point of the national plan is not necessarily to just come in and save the day here, but the point is that we get the most out of all of our collective resources, and that we are using the same information to get the word out. Because you've heard every single one of these presentations, somebody used the word misinformation, and that's one of the things we want to get past. We need to get a consistent message. It needs to be a good one. And that's one of the things we're trying to do through the national plan. And again, there are even some folks involved that aren't on the list there. So communications, research, agency outreach, political action. Those are the main elements of this national plan. If anybody wants to talk to me more about that offline outside the prayer, I'll be happy to do that. So we've talked about misinformation, diverse opinions. Again, it is okay to question, because the fact of the matter is, and I've said this many times, if we were to go on trial about CWD right now, we would have a hard time proving a lot of things in the court of law, right? We don't have the evidence. That's why the research is so important. So for example, research right now as part of this national plan is being prioritized in a way that, number one, we look at what we've been doing to manage the disease in the landscape, and then asking ourselves the question, has that been working? So for example, when we have an outbreak, has it been working to go in and kill a whole bunch of deer in an area? And what have we done with those results? Is that working? That's a fair question. Because man, I can't think of anything that ticks off hunters more than having to go down that road, okay? Maybe it is the right thing, but we need to know those answers. We need to ask those questions. A lot of things on social media. I've had multiple meetings here as part of trying to fundraise and raise awareness for the Deer Alliance, CWD, and so on. And just about every one of those meetings we talked about this divide, okay? Almost like, I hate to even bring it up, but we're talking about building walls, right? So we're building a wall unintentionally among the CWD believers and the non-believers. And the fact of the matter is, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and that's what we need to get to, is the middle. It doesn't do us any good to rant on one side and say it's false, it doesn't exist, we shouldn't worry about it. That's not helpful. It also doesn't do us any good to say, well, we know everything there is to know about it, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and that's how we get rid of it, because we don't know that either. The truth is in the middle, and we're going to get a lot further by working together on this and not apart. I can't do a talk like this talking about Roosevelt. The point here is we need to do something. We can't just ignore it. It's not going to go away. We have to accept that it's here. We got to deal with it. We got to deal with it in the right way, because this is what's at stake. Everything we're doing under this roof is what's at stake. Deer hunting, big game hunting, 80% of the entire industry. Deer, big game. That's what's at stake here, folks. So we need to be smart. We need to protect this animal. We need to protect this industry. And I think at this point, we're looking forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. Powerful comments from well-respected folks. So what we want to do now is open it up to you. You've heard a lot of information from the science, why hunters need to be engaged, what they can do, what's going on at kind of high level. But we cover a lot of material in a short period of time, so now's a chance to kind of dive into a few areas. So we've got a microphone. Raise hands, we'll start back here. A couple ground rules. Please ask questions. First, state your name, your affiliation. If you've got a specific individual you want the question to go to, shoot it to them. Otherwise, we'll open it up for the rest of them. But we want to keep the questions here, and so we can get a lot more information out specific to what you want in this group. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my name is Will Brantley. I'm hunting editor at Field and Stream Magazine, and I guess my question is kind of directed at Kip, and it's specifically, I guess, a couple of questions about the testing procedure itself. And I don't know, I'm in Kentucky, which at the moment is not a CWD state, but have a couple of states that border us that are, including Tennessee, where I do some hunting, and have just here recently had to change some of the practices and how we transport our meat and stuff. But, being in Kentucky, I've never seen a CWD testing facility. I wouldn't know the procedure to have it do testing in Kentucky. And so what I'm wondering, does the rate of testing, does it increase or tend to increase in states where it's found, and then like in states where it doesn't exist yet, like when it looks like it's creeping a little closer, do they begin testing more frequently? Like I know it was discovered in Mississippi, I think in northern Mississippi here a couple of years ago, and so it stood to reason to me that, well, they started testing more frequently in southwest Tennessee, and what do you know, they found it. So I think there's probably some things about that testing procedure that hunters don't know. I mean, it's not something that I'm real familiar with. So I'm sure the average reader of Field and Stream probably doesn't.
Yeah, that's a great question, Will. And states do it differently. Some states test a lot more deer than other deer do. You're exactly right with the Tennessee example. Tennessee had been testing for deer. Where they found it there was targeted surveillance based on it being right on the next county across the line in Mississippi. So that was a good job by the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, specifically looking where it most likely would be, but they have been testing through there. So, and you're right, the states that have it, in most cases, test a lot more than states that haven't, mostly to identify prevalence of it in an area and to identify spread. So they need to know, hey, do we need to go in and likely hit this really hard and maybe snuff out the spark that's right here? Or no, is this likely already spread pretty wide and there's no reason to go in and try to decimate all these deer, given that it's well immersed in that population now. So you're very fortunate where you are. They haven't identified it. If it was found in your area, I guarantee Kentucky Fish and Wildlife would notify all the hunters there. Hey, this is where you get it tested. This is how. This is why. So hopefully that never does have to happen. You don't have to worry about being tested in Kentucky.
Sure, I hope not. Would it be fair to say that if states that aren't CWD positive, I mean, I know the testing is, it's kind of a pain. It's kind of expensive. Would it be fair to say that the testing were more prevalent? I mean, let's say if you're not in a CWD state, and if testing became just a part of the day-to-day life of deer hunting, if that part of the culture were to change, do you think that it would be found in more places than you would almost have to assume that, yeah, it would be to some degree, but is it that targeted testing in those areas of concern? Is that what's more important?
I'm going to speak briefly to the lab situation because I got some intel on that. It's a capacity issue right now. There's not enough labs in this country to even really handle the volumes they have now in many cases. In some states, I don't know if Chuck Sykes is here, some states are actually setting up their own state-specific labs to take that burden off some of the other labs that they utilize. So there's currently not enough lab capacity for all hunters to do it, and it would also further burden existing hunters to a point where we'd probably erode hunter participation by another hurdle they have to jump through that's necessary.
So add something real quick. I used to be the director of the Wildlife Resources Agency in Georgia. So the issue is how much money do you spend? USDA originally provided states money to do testing. That dried up. So now states have to rob from PR funds or license funds to do testing. So because of efficiency, they target surveillance on high suspect areas. Wish you could do more. You might find it earlier before prevalence rose, but it's an issue there and a challenge, which is one of the things that Nick talked about the priority, to get funding for testing. And then the capacity will follow, hopefully.
Will, I'll end with the same, to give you the scale issue on states that have it or don't. In 2017, all states in the United States tested about 100,000 deer for CWD. Missouri alone tested over 25,000 of those. So Missouri alone tested more than a quarter of all the deer in the entire country. Because of it spread, and Missouri Department of Conservation did an excellent job really identifying exactly where is it and how much is it spread. But some states literally tested a few hundred. They had over 25,000.
We got a question over here. You are going to be a runner, John. Thank you.
Bruce Hutchin, Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast and Whitetail Rendezvous Media Group. And simply, I live in Colorado, and if you look at Grant Wood's map, Colorado is black. I mean, there's CWD. And I hunt in Sauk County. Our farm is in Sauk County, Wisconsin. So my elk is in prime CWD counties in Colorado, and my deer live in prime CWD. Yet I eat elk and I eat venison. And I've been doing that for quite a long time. How can we convince the public that CWD isn't a health threat, isn't going to diminish hunting, because we eat it in our camp and our farm and everything. But more and more people I'm seeing on social media, oh, you can't do that. You shouldn't eat your meat. If you go to Colorado to hunt, you shouldn't eat that meat. You got to be very careful of that elk. You know, what can we do as a society to help reassure people that their meat is good?
Well, I'm going to give you some insights that I got from CDC's top prion researcher, Dr. Schoenberger. And I had a good long conversation with him recently and asked him how CDC would track incidents of human infection. And they look at all brain disease, or there's many different forms of brain disease involved. In this particular case, with CWD, looking for clusters of young people, because for whatever reason, between ages 10 and 12, humans would be most potentially infectious to CWD material if they are. It takes about 10 to 20 years for these things to.
So you're saying I'm too old?
They're looking for 30 and 40-year-old humans in clusters in areas that have high incidence of CWD over time. They're not finding it. Okay, there's no evidence of any increased trends of the human equivalent of CWD in infected areas with a history of CWD in 20, 30, 40-year-olds. So that's reassuring. However, if you also talk to the top prion folks around the country, more often than not, they'll lean the other way and say, but it's probably more likely than not eventually to happen. Prion diseases are known to mutate. So jury's still out. How we message that accurately without being too far left or right is really a decision for a lot of the folks in this room.
Follow up on that. There's never been a case. How do we know that I have CWD today? And I'm way past that, age group that you spoke about. And I've been in venison for 50 years from the same farm.
Well, as I think Grant pointed out, or somebody did, there's literally been hundreds of thousands, if not more, CWD-infected animals consumed by humans. In that case, the USGS map from a couple of years ago showed 32,000 successful hunters from Dane, Iowa, and whatever the other county is there in Wisconsin, and only 300 of those 32,000 were tested. And that's about a 20% prevalence rate in that area. So just sheer math, just from that one season in 4 counties, there were 220,000 animals consumed in positive, just from one area one year. So the more we eat it and the fewer or zero people get infected, the better off we'll be able to message that story. But we don't know. It could be that it changes over time.
Got another question? And while
Thank you.
We've got that, just a quick follow-up there. The reality also is that the biologists and the agencies aren't the authorities on human health. So you've got to defer that decision to the national experts. And so they're in communication with them to help message that, because there's been some faults and spits and sputters, and we're getting better. But they're the ones that ultimately have to make that determination, because they're the experts. Sir.
Yes, my name is Pat Reeves. I have a television show on the outdoor channel called Driven TV. I am from southeastern Minnesota, which is currently massively under a lot of heat with CWD. Actually, later in this month and later in the first part of February, the state is opening up a special hunt because of CWD, which is the first ever. My question to the panel would be, how do we, specifically, how does QDMA start holding the state agencies a little more accountable for massive eradication, just trying to diminish the deer population in large quantities without having to answer to the public and specifically to the hunters, because then it causes this big, massive knee-jerk reaction, which again affects a lot of future hunters, it affects business owners, it affects a lot of people in those geographical areas where they're eradicating in these zones, and it starts to become a scare tactic. You guys alluded to this, and when you were talking, is we don't know if eradication is really the answer, and it's going to help control CWD, spread of CWD. So why are we allowing the states to go in there and try to eradicate and reduce the populations? I mean, are we just allowing them to do it, hoping that that's going to be one of the solutions, or because it is affecting the future, it is affecting our deer and our hunters without the states really being held accountable?
Well, the state wildlife agencies have authority, over what they want to do there, so we can't tell them what they can or cannot do. However, we work with almost every state wildlife agency when they get it, and the tactic we have taken is shown them very clearly, hey, here are the strategies that these other states have used, and here is at least what seems to be helping, particularly from a hunter engagement standpoint. And there are some extremely positive examples, Michigan being one, where the agency has a really good working relationship with the hunters. And we have, actually, QDMA has more members and more QDMA branches in Michigan than any other state in the north. And we have developed a tremendous relationship with the DNR. And the DNR said, you know, it is so helpful to us when CWD hit there that literally with a handful of phone calls, they had the net information out to literally tens of thousands of hunters in that area saying, hey, here's what our plan is, here's where we need help, can you help us in these areas? And got really good cooperation from the hunters to try to do that. That's very different from what a lot of states are doing, such as in Minnesota right now, where, you know, not working nearly as closely with those hunters can completely alienate them. And then once they're on the other side, they need the hunters to implement that plan. And I understand the seriousness of the disease and the seriousness that they want to hit this with. But our role has been to say, hey, we really think that you need to have the hunters on your side and help and support this. The way to make that happen is to be a good partner, to educate the hunters on why we should be doing this, but then from the agency's end, to use something that's very responsible and has at least been shown to work somewhere else, or allow the hunters to be willing participants and stay helpful. Because that does not seem to be what's happening right now in Minnesota, which is too bad because nobody is going to win at the end when it's like that. So we tried to share that information to show where other positive examples of where it has worked very well, taking a different tack. Yeah, Graham makes a very good point too. I think there are big differences between reducing deer herds and eradicating deer herds. And that is one thing where the education is so important with that, because agencies aren't trying to eradicate deer. However, as soon as they start talking about big deer numbers, obviously as hunters we get nervous about that and think, oh, they're going to take them all away. So our position is, you know, agencies need to really be out in front of this, providing good information to hunters, letting them know, hey, here's our plan, here's exactly what we expect, this is not what we're trying to do. And some states do that very, very well, and some don't do that nearly as well. And that really comes back to bite agencies if they don't get that good message out there to hunters right off the bat. And as well as adding kind of a timeline in that to what to expect. Not just now, but hey, here's what we expect, you know, a couple years down the road, or you know, maybe 5 years down the road, we hope to have this part taken care of and can start seeing some other changes in those densities.
Tom Ham from Pennsylvania. I work at an archery shop and I write for some state-specific outdoor publications. The deer call and the additional antlerless license, that's a hot-button issue. And the shop I work in just recently found this place smack dab in the middle of the new disease management area, the most recent one in Pennsylvania. Being that it was found in deer farms, a lot of the reaction that I get from customers and listening to people in the public was, they're the enemy. And I dare say that someone that makes their living raising deer wants to encourage CWD. That's how they make their money. I also realize I can't help but imagine that the wild deer population is a little more economically valuable than the farm deer population in Pennsylvania. When people start talking about deer farms as the culprit, you know, what's the feel of that where this is happening elsewhere? How do you guys respond to that? And what are your thoughts on that? So simply because that's obviously where we find it.
I think we can fairly say that deer farms are a source of possible infection and risk, just as are wild birds that are infected. So I don't think it's fair to point it at either one in sole sort of responsibility for this problem. We just passed 100 captive deer facilities that have tested positive for CWD since testing began. I heard today that only 16 of those were those that had passed the 5-year requirement to be low CWD risk status. So obviously we want more and more farms to try to adhere to that standard. But if there's 6,000 deer farms out there, just the sheer movement, natural business movements of deer and deer farming, if you looked at that slide that Grant showed, that was known movements of captive deer just in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of risk. But you look at hunters moving from state to state, transporting potentially infected animals, that map would look worse. The number of hunters is far outweighs the number of captive deer facilities. So we have to both look ourselves in the mirror and clean up both of our acts before anybody can say that one is more potentially responsible than another at this point.
Understood. Do you guys get a sense that the Department of Agriculture in various states are just as concerned about this as we are?
No, I don't. And in fact, just Nick alluded to it a little bit, we're just now starting to get a little bit more cooperation and interest from the Department of Ag. And of course, Department of Ag in most states now controls jurisdiction over captive cervids. many wildlife agencies are losing jurisdiction over time to the ag side. And ag's mission is to help rural farmers make money producing things. It's not wild deer health and survival that state wildlife agencies have as their mission. So for the first time, we're getting some higher level discussions between the secretaries in DC. Hopefully we're going to see some movement on that. Some cooperation between Interior and Ag that we've needed for a long, long time that we have not seen. Very good, thank you.
Tom, I'll end by saying, there's been a lot of mudslinging between captive folks and the wildlife folks and all that. At the end of the day, nobody gets anywhere with that, and there's no need for that. We know it's in captive deer, we know it's in wild deer, and at the end of the day, we know that we move it most easily by moving live deer and moving the high-risk parts of dead deer. So we don't need to sling, you have a deer farm, you're bad, or we need to just get past all of that and say, hey, you know what, we mess around with urine and minerals and all this stuff. Those are so low on the bucket compared to moving live deer and moving the high-risk parts. We need to take care of those two things at the big top of the list. And we would do more good for all of us, captive and wild folks, than anything else. That is where the real impetus needs to be.
Great point. Focus on the high probability targets and cooperation. We'll get there.
I want to make one statement here just on QDMA's behalf. We support a moratorium on the movement of live deer in this country, deer and elk, service, period. That's whether they're captive or a state. Several states are still moving deer and elk, folks. It's not just captive deer farmers. And they have the same limitations of lack of a practical live animal test there too. So we need a national moratorium on the movement of live deer. We need uniform standards for carcass movement and transport across the country. If we got those two things, folks, we're doing 90% of what we can do right now to stop the spread of this stuff. The rest of it's window dressing.
I'm Josh Winnicott, Associate Editor and Deer Hunting Editor for Realtree.com, and I guess my question goes more toward the consumption of meat. It was reported, I guess it was probably back in 2017, that I think her name is Stephanie Zoot. She is apparently with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the University of Calgary, and apparently she presented at the 2017 Prion Conference in Scotland that basically the last little bit of the complacency was kind of, I guess, not more or less blown away whenever it was said that macaques could contract CWD. I guess my question is, has that been peer reviewed? Has it been proven that macaques do to a high degree contract CWD? And if so, is that a significant concern for human consumption?
Yeah, they've actually looked at that, and Nick said meeting up with the folks at the National Prion Surveillance Lab at Case Western University in Ohio last fall. Gracious enough to invite us to it, so we got to listen to some of the best prion minds from the human side in the world. What they said, take a look at that, because we asked specifically about it, and they said that basically, and they weren't downgrade, they said it has not been published, and it is unlikely to be published because of some of the methodology, just wasn't as tight standards as it should have been. So it probably never will be. Following that, though, there's been more research showing that it is peer-reviewed to show that macaques did not become infected during that treatment. So hopefully that was a big scare, but so there's much stronger evidence now that the macaques could not be infected by it than that initial study.
Kip mentioned the Prion Center, so we developed a really nice relationship with the National Prion Center at Case Western. Before we found them, most people don't even know that exists. So these are some of the top prion scientists in the world. And I wanted to mention this earlier because it's related. The human similar disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD, which you may have seen in some of the mainstream media. So they spend a lot of time studying that disease. That's actually why they were found, and that's the human disease. And they have been trying to see if there is any link between CWD and CJD, and they have not found that link. And they are specifically charged to do these things. So that's a positive thing. That's certainly something in our direction in terms of crossing the species barrier. But those are the types of people that we need to be working with who aren't obvious wildlife people, but they work on this disease. They're prion experts. And I think that that relationship has been extremely helpful to our cause.
Good point.
Mike Higman, the Down South Hunting Podcast. This question's from Nick. You mentioned 3 bills that have been proposed. How do we know what bill that we need to get behind and when's the right time to do that? I feel like we should all be doing that at the same time with the same effort.
That's a great question. Because yeah. Well, a couple of things. I mean, yeah, the obvious one is if you are members of our organizations, if you follow our National Deer Alliance newsletters and so on, it's free to do that. We put that information out there. But that being said, it's a more complicated answer than that, because now when we've got this change in the House, we've got all these people, we did all this education work heading into last year, and now we've had the election, and now it's new faces and it's new people. And these bills are constantly changing as well. So our plans are we need to get back to the Hill, start working with the new faces and tee these things up again and get them in a position where they have an opportunity to see the light of day. At that point, then we will call on you. If you're in our database and we have a way of getting in touch with you, we will call on you to then contact your legislators. We try to make it as easy as possible. ATA does this now. We do this. QDMA will do it. We will let you know when the time is right to do that.
So Nick, how would folks become a member of NDA?
Just nationaldeeralliance.com. You can click the join button. It's free. So we'll give you the newsletter with the information, but also you put your zip code in there, and that makes it easy for us to contact you also on a local issue that impacts you directly. It's just like you never swim to the same river twice. It's the same thing on these bills. They're constantly changing. And that's the ugly work, the stuff you don't see all the time that we're doing, but I promise you we'll let you know when the opportunity.
So on that front, I might ask you where would be the best source of information to go on your own to get something like that?
Yeah, so we continually point people to the CWD Alliance website. That's cwd-info.org. That is constantly updated with all of the latest information on chronic wasting disease. It's unbiased. It's the facts are the facts, okay? It's not emotional. And if there's a new outbreak, you see it. Any new research, you see it. That is really the gold standard of CWD information maintained by the Wildlife Management Institute. cwd-info.org.
Perfect. Okay.
Keith Chandler with Precision Design Products and Archery Manufacturer. And two questions. First, do you feel older deer are more likely to be affected simply because they've been subjected to it longer? Or does advanced age make them more susceptible? If so, is it as likely 2 to 3-year-old deer have it as 1 to 6-year-old deer?
Grant, why don't you take that?
Older deer have done two things. They've been in the environment longer, so a little bit higher chance they could come in contact with it. And bucks, primarily talking about here, in this question right here, you know, they're very social. They're going doe group and doe group and doe group. So it's just like, I'm going to shake one hand or shake 50 hands. Which one am I going to have more of a chance to get the flu or the ATA crud at? Does are the same way, older, been in the environment more, but doe groups tend to stay in their range or smaller range a little bit better and associate with maternal groups here. So they're not having all the social contacts that bucks are. That's why a lot of times in Wisconsin, buck prevalence rates will really be knocking on 50% or slightly over. And in those same counties, doe prevalence rates will be in the 20s or so.
One thing I will add to that, though, I think is very important for folks to realize, because people get so keyed in on the buck side of this and often forget about the animal side. There's some research out of Wisconsin that shows that you take an adult doe in Wisconsin, and if she has an infected relative nearby, you know, does live in these doe groups, you know, grandmothers, all of it. So if a doe lives in an area where there's at least just one infected kin nearby, that doe is 10 times more likely to be infected with CWD than a deer in adjacent that's not related to it. So many, in our opinion, so much of the discussion on CWD and management goes right to the buck side. Oh, we got to kill them, we got to kill them. But yet, then we allow animal side to increase. You end up with these reservoirs for CWD in these areas that, as of now, we do not know a way to decontaminate. So that's why our stance has been keep hunters engaged, continue harvesting the antlerless deer, allow some of those bucks out there to get into the older age classes to keep hunters engaged. But we think that is a much better path for the future. On paper, sure, it might work out great, kill all the bucks and keep deer herds low, but that's not the real world. You don't manage deer on paper. You have to have hunters. To do that, you need to have hunters to implement the plan. So we think there's not nearly enough talk about the animal side.
Okay, we're actually at the time limit, but this is great discussion, great engagement. I'd suggest we got one, I know one other question, we've got 2 more questions, and then I'll ask panelists to leave us with one compelling thought, or suggestion, or action item, and then we'll wrap it up. So,
Garrett Powell, the Sports Nation Podcast Network. My question is in regards to practice disability. So, I'm from a state that has an awful lot of public land. One of the stipulations of hunters that hunt in that public land is that they must remove all parts of the deer other than the entrails. So, knowing that the spinal cord and the head need to be moved from the side of kill, what are some of the best places for hunters to dispose of those parts? And are there better alternatives? Should we be pushing our local legislature to either create more sites or allow things like the methods to be used on those public lands?
Super question. So let's take that.
Yeah, no one has a good yeah, I mean, basically, if they don't have a designated disposal site where they take them from some type of container to an incinerator or a landfill on their own, approved landfill is your best second bet. Most of those are lined now to prevent leaching and various things, other toxic things, so the best bet would be a landfill. And if you had no other alternative, I'd say bury it as deep as you can possibly shovel. That's not an official approved method.
That is also why a lot of processors and taxidermists, the stuff that leaves those sites goes to landfill partly because of that. So that is by far the best if that option is available to you.
Great question.
Brian, you mentioned a kind of a national standard on regulations on carcass transport. What does that look like? Is that just deboned meat, clean skull caps, or is it quarters with the bone still in them and clean skull caps? And then also, what is a clean skull cap? Is it just cut off the head? Is it boiled? Is it pressure washed? What do we need to tell our readers to be doing?
It's ironic, we had this conversation yesterday, and I think not all of us here, but I had a conversation with a couple of people yesterday on this very subject. We uniformly believe it needs to be deboned meat and clean skull caps. Yes, not quarters. So have a uniform standard practice that every hunter knows how to debone their game and clean their skull caps. Clean skull cap, I think there's some debate as to what that really means. Right? You take the brain matter out and get a lot of the most infectious material, as we know, many times, thousands of times more concentrated in the brain material. Does pressure washing help that much more? I don't know. You know, I don't know what practices. Boiling probably not hot enough to denature the protein in the first place. Boiling it probably helps not smell bad, but I don't know if it's killing any more prions. And that's out of my area of expertise right there. That's getting in Dr. Henderson's league. That would be our recommendation at this point as an organization.
Cool. Got one more. Perfect.
Dan Johnson, Sportsman's Nation. So the other side of the argument has a pretty good delivery and a pretty convincing, like, the way they deliver it about their opinions on CWD. So the question is, what steps are being taken from a bipartisan process to reach out to those, communicate with those people who are very vocal, and at the same time, what can I do as a communicator to inform those who have been influenced or convinced by the other side of the argument?
Great question.
Dan, great question. And first of all, thank you. As one of the Dan's podcast, Nine Finger Chronicles, has addressed this issue many times, and as many other podcasters here that I'm aware of your shows, guys from the Element up front here, have tackled this issue. And that's one thing that can help, because you guys you're the people, frankly, that people are listening to more than us. Because you guys are out there, you live it, they relate to what you're doing. So that's helpful. So that's one way. Here are the couple realities. So number one, there's not a person in here that wishes this disease existed. Not a single one of us. Okay? So therefore, we are all naturally biased to want to believe positive things about it. So if your message is, we've got nothing to worry about, and most of you don't die from CWD anyway, and that's a very welcoming and compelling message if you're somebody that doesn't want to take the time to learn about it, and you just want to hear something that makes you feel better, okay? And then the other thing that kicks in is an affinity bias. If you have, in particular, celebrities or other people with a big platform, there's a great opportunity for those types of folks to help this and say, listen, there's a lot we don't know, but what we need to do is learn more and be proactive. It's okay if we don't like things. But what doesn't help is whenever you just get up there and you say, it's not true, it's a money-making scheme, and by the way, it's the worst money-making scheme I've ever seen in my life. That is not helpful. Okay, so we need less of that, and we need more of this, more of these types of discussions. We need to be careful to say that we don't have all the answers, and we don't know everything. And we might be wrong. You know, I would love, by the way, to 10 years from now, to find out that this was all a much ado about nothing. That's fine. I'll be happy to look like a fool then. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. We just need to be smart about it. And you guys, I thank you again, because you are making a difference as well, and we appreciate it.
You are and will continue to make a difference. So
I think, Dan, a great question. This is exactly what this was meant to do. Absolutely. For what you mentioned was for that. And two, I think that there's a lot of people confused about, well, he says this or she says this, who do I believe? You can take a look back, I think, in almost every case. The vast majority of wildlife folks, are sharing the same message that we just shared today. And you can take a look at the folks who are sharing a very opposite message. And in almost every case, those folks are far more invested in the captive side than the wild deer side. almost every single wildlife professional working with wild deer is with the uniform message that we had here today. And that is nothing negative on the campsite by all. It's saying I understand that there are both sides being slung, and the side that disagrees completely with what we're saying, almost to a person, every single one of them works mostly on the captive side. So to the average deer hunter who's hunting wild deer, it is certainly in their best interest, I think, to look at the vast majority of wildlife folks sharing this message, because wild deer is what we're trying to get there.
All right, Grant, why don't you take the mic and lead this group with whatever words of wisdom, suggested action item you want them to take away from
I'm really
today.
happy I got to go first on this one. I'm really happy about first on the last one. And I'll steal Brian's line. Actually, we've all said it many times. If I was deer czar, I would stop all movement of live deer and only appropriate deer parts moving. That's the most important thing we can do right now.
Okay, yep. I'm going to leave mine from an eating standpoint. You hear people say, you know, well, I can eat this because it doesn't look sick. And we suggest that if you're in an area like that you get it tested, don't eat it first, because almost all deer that have CWD die of something else. And research shows that if a deer is CWD positive, it dies at 3 to 4 times the rate of one that is not. It just ends up dying to a car, a predator, or something else before the CWD actually gets it. So the whole thing of the deer didn't look sick, I should be able to eat it, is totally false. Do not go down that road at all. So if you're hunting in an area that has it, get it tested and wait for a satisfactory test before you eat it.
Okay, Brian?
I would say remain hopeful. Don't be doom and gloom at the end of the world, and share messages of optimism. I'm a natural optimist. Look back just over 100 years ago, we had almost no whitetail deer in this country. Modern wildlife management, modern science brought us the most abundant big game populations on the planet. And I believe in science, and I believe in the ingenuity of Americans. And I think we're going to solve this stuff. We've got to buy ourselves some time, do the right things as long as we can, and fight the good fight. I want to look my daughters in the eye 20, 30 years from now when this stuff, we don't do the good fight, and say, man, we should have done more. And we have a chance to do more. And we're in a generation right now that will make a difference for the next 50 to 100 years of what hunting looks like in this country and what conservation looks like. So we've got to get off our backsides and be optimistic.
Yeah, similarly, I would just say we need to own this. Nobody's walking through that door, folks, with an antidote and a shot that they're going to stick in a deer's leg and it's going to solve the problem. That is not happening. And don't look up here to us to say we're solving it either. This is an all of us thing. We're all one big family under the roof of this building. Industry, to be smart, we need to ask questions, and we need to work together.
Great. So I can't add much more than that. I think they're going to be here for a little while. If you've got some follow-up, by all means, come up here. I certainly appreciate Friends with QDMA, National Deer Alliance Grant. Thank you for sharing with us. We obviously have a challenge. We've got a lot to learn. There is a lot we can do. There's certainly hope. We can work together, and we appreciate y'all coming today and being a part of the solution moving forward.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.